What's up, guys? So I want to talk about this works of the law and earning salvation. This came up again in my feed today. Someone saying that the Jews weren't trying to earn their salvation, and basically, therefore, Paul couldn't have been talking about good works and merit and earning salvation. Therefore, he was only talking about the Jewish civil ceremonial law, the inclusion of Gentiles, and therefore, you do have to do good works and there is some sort of merit. Okay, that's the basic argument that's made. First of all, I want to address this idea that the Jews weren't trying to earn salvation. Because for some people, if the Jews weren't trying to earn salvation, therefore Paul could not have been talking about trying to earn salvation. Well, people who say this are primarily leaning upon the work of E.P. Sanders, who claimed in Paul and Palestinian Judaism that there wasn't a consensus among Jews, it wasn't a widespread teaching among Jews that one had to earn their salvation. Okay, so people take this thesis of E.P. Sanders and they say, therefore, Paul couldn't have been talking about earning salvation. Okay, first of all, what did E.P. Sanders actually say? E.P. Sanders did not say that there were no Jews who thought they earned their salvation. In fact, if you actually look in E.P. Sanders' work, he does have some quotes from some Jews who did think that their righteousness before God was based on their own good works and their own merits, and it was something that they earned and that accrued to them based on what they did. And E.P. Sanders does admit that there were some pockets of Jews who thought this way. He just claims that this was not the majority teaching, that the majority teaching was rather something that he called covenantal nomism. That's for another video. So, first of all, is it possible that Paul was addressing some Jews who did think that way? Yes. E.P. Sanders didn't say that there were no Jews who thought that way. There were. E.P. Sanders showed that in his work. Now, secondly, even if it was the case that there were no Jews who explicitly thought that way, it would still be the case that Paul, very clearly and explicitly in the text of Romans itself, does talk about earning your salvation. He talks about merit. He has an explicit contrast between a righteousness that comes to you based on what you do, that accrues to you as something that's owed to you based on what you've done, or a righteousness that comes to you as a free gift despite the fact that you have not done, and that is explicitly contrasted with the idea that you could ever do it. So what Paul would then be doing, and I think this is what Paul is doing to a large extent, is he's reframing, he's recasting the Jewish insistence upon doing the Torah and saying, look, if you're going to be so adamant upon doing the Torah, let me show you what you're really saying. You're saying, essentially, that righteousness before God is something accrued to you based on what you do. And Paul says, no, in fact, a righteousness based on what you do is utterly impossible. And if that was how righteousness came to you, then Christ died for none effect, because you have all not done. You have all sinned. We have all sinned. Therefore, it cannot come to us based on what we do. Rather, righteousness comes to us based on faith, based on what Christ did. An essential part of this righteousness that Paul describes, this faith that Paul describes, is an affirmation. It's that I cannot earn it. I cannot achieve it. You see this clearly in Romans 10, where he says, the righteousness based on law says the one who does these things shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? Who will descend into the deep? That is to bring Christ down. That is to raise Christ up. Rather, what does it say? It says, it is already near you, in your mouth, on your lips, the word of faith that we preach. That if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your mouth that you confess and are justified. It is with your heart that you believe and are saved. So this salvation that comes to you directly on the basis of this faith, if you have this faith, you are righteous, period, says Paul. This righteousness is a righteousness that explicitly says, do not say in your heart, how will we achieve these great things? That is, you're denying that Christ has already done these things. How will we resurrect from the dead? How will we go into heaven? You're denying that Jesus has already done that work for you. It's already near you. Christ has already done it. Just believe that he's done it. This is how Paul presents it. So, again, was there a widespread teaching, a consensus among Jews that they had to earn their salvation? That wasn't the way they understood it. There were some Jews who thought that way. That wasn't the way that most Jews thought about it. However, when it came to this question of whether or not Christians had to do the Torah, Paul reframes the Jewish insistence upon doing Torah and says, what you're essentially saying is that righteousness comes to you based on what you do. Now let me show you why that's impossible, and let me show you a more excellent way, the way of faith. Now, obviously this is a faith that works through love, etc. It's a repentant faith. It's a fiduciary faith. It's an empty hand. It's a faith which affirms I could never do it. There's nothing I could ever do except just believe and receive it. It's based on what he did, not based on what I do. I have no merit. I have no righteousness. It's based on his free gift. I'm a sinner deserving condemnation. Right? That's the kind of faith he's talking about. Now, secondly, so does this mean that we are free from doing good works? Okay, in what sense are we free from doing good works? We are free from doing good works in this sense. Our righteousness before God is not based upon our having done good works, nor is it based on our continuing to do a sufficient amount of good works, nor is it based on our, neither of those. So we are freed from good works in that sense, in the sense that our salvation is not dependent upon our performance of good works. Now, in what sense are we still required to do good works? Well, wait, let me back that up for a second, because some of you might have a problem with that. Let's go to Romans 7, and Paul says we're freed from this law. We've died to this law. And he says it's the law which says do not covet. It is the 10 Commandments. It's the basic moral law that Paul says we're freed from. Again, in Romans 3, he says, through the law comes knowledge of sin. He doesn't say through the law comes knowledge of circumcision, kosher food laws, these sort of arbitrary things that aren't actually sin. He says, no, through the law comes knowledge of sin. Because when God tells you do not covet, it arouses inside of you covetousness. It shows you, oh crap, that's what I've been doing. Ooh, that's evil. And I've been doing it. Sin. And when you try to obey, you realize, crap, I can't actually do it. And even when God helps you and he assists you and he transforms you, you realize even more how far you're falling short. So the law, the commandment, do not sin, that reveals to us our need for him. That reveals to us our sin. So we're freed from the law in the sense of our salvation being dependent upon our fulfillment of the law. Now, in what way are we still required to do good works? Well, good works are evidence that we have a true repentant faith in Christ, that we love Christ, that we've been justified. And it's not only evidence. Some Christians would say it's only evidence. The things you do cannot in any way affect your salvation. Now, that is wrong. And Paul is very clear about this, and it's also just common sense. If you start sinning, if you start neglecting good works, you're putting yourself in an environment where you're going to have a lot of temptations. Your faith will start to erode as you sin, as you avoid doing good works, and you are putting yourself in danger of losing your faith if you're not behaving correctly. So good works can affect salvation, but it's not based on the good works. It's based on that repentant faith and that alone. If you are saying, yes, God, to his free offer, if you are believing in your heart, if you love Jesus, it's based on that alone. You're trusting in him. That's the only thing. And this, I can show a Catholic this is true based on Catholic dogmatic, infallible dogma of the Catholic Church. When you die, what is the only thing that determines whether you go to heaven or not? That's whether you have sanctifying grace in your soul, the 3 theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. So if you die with this kind of faith that works through love, this kind of faith formed through love, if you die with that, it doesn't matter how many bad works you've done up to the very moment you died. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how many good works you've done up to the very moment you've died. Your works are completely, absolutely, totally irrelevant to the question of whether you are saved or not. The only thing that matters in terms of Catholic dogma is whether you have that formed faith, whether you have faith, hope, and love, whether you have that sanctifying grace. That is the only thing, that faith and that faith alone, which determines whether you're in relationship with God or out of relationship with God. Now, it's unfortunate that I have to go and explain this in according to Catholic dogma, because this is very clear in Scripture, and it's really just common sense. God is God. He's the one who redeemed us. He's the one who loves us. He's the one who saves us. He's offering us a free gift. He wants us to receive it. If we're saying yes, if we're truly saying yes, then we have it. And there's nothing else we could ever do to receive it other than just say yes. If we're saying yes, we have it. If we're saying no, we don't, because we've rejected it. And that's the only thing that could possibly affect your salvation. Your good works can, whether or not you are doing good works or sinning, can put you in situations in which your faith could be eroded. It can put you in situations in which you might lose your faith. You might say, you know what, I don't really want it anymore. And it's subtle, because your decision to sin sometimes, you might not be aware that by doing that, you're actually kind of turning your back on that free gift. So we have to be careful about that. But it's extremely important that we understand that it is not our works, not even our grace-inspired works, which determines whether or not we are in or out of relationship with God, whether we are justified or not, whether we're saved or not. We are freed from our salvation, our righteousness being dependent upon what we do. If it was dependent upon what we do, it would be impossible, and Christ would have died in vain. Okay, so thank you guys for listening. God bless y'all. Love y'all. I'm out.